Oh, sorry about that. A little technical difficulties. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining this June 19th presentation for the 30-day redemption. I am Kashab, and today we have a wonderful presentation. So we just invite everyone to make sure you have your pens, your pads, and just itch out the next hour, maybe hour and 15 minutes. And I'm only saying that because the information is so powerful and so relevant that you want to make sure we get the time for the Q&A. So if we go over a little bit, bear with us, but it's necessary for this particular presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and get the screens queued up and announce our guest. So just bear with me 1 second. Let me get that going. Also, if anyone has your mic unmuted, just mute it until we go ahead and get started, just so we're not getting any interference. The funny thing is, and you guys may see it saying loading on the screen, the funny thing is, of all times my computer chooses to freeze up, it's today. But that's okay, we'll get through it. All right, so today, 30-day redemption, June 19th. We're in the body segment. What a great way to get close to the end of our body segment. And the reason why this is important as far as being a body is because we're going to talk about bodies of people and cultures. And so today, the principles of politically autonomous and self-governing societies. We'll touch on the Suriname Maroons, the Jamaican Maroons, and the Gullah Geechee people who occupy the coast of the United States, from North Carolina down to Florida. Now, disclaimer, the opinions expressed in this presentation are those of the presenters. They do not purport to reflect the opinions or views of the 30-day redemption or its members, officers, staff, partners, or advertisers. So we're going to have three guests. We're going to have Director Z, and he is the facilitator of a groundbreaking Maroon educational program called Blueprint of Sovereignty, Maroon Ethnicity, Family, Health and Wellness, Law and Economy, that trains students in the operational principles which were used by historic Maroons to organize, develop, and perpetuate thriving autonomous societies, and the updated version of these systems that modern Maroons currently practice today. We're going to have Diane, and she is of a Suriname Dutch translator, editor, and columnist. And we're going to have Dana Roberts. And Dana was born on the coast of Georgia in the town of Brunswick. She was educated in the Glenn County school system. Dana's family can trace their family history in this country back 8 generations, beginning at the Hoffwell Brownsfield rice plantation in the Needwood community of Brunswick. The family maintains a strong oral tradition of passing down the Gullah Geechee culture to its descendants. As a result, Dana grew up with a strong sense of community and activism. That began at an early age. She continues in these efforts today by serving as president of the Genoa Martin Friends of Historic Selden Park Association. The family gives local tours focusing and emphasizing on the historical significance of African American sites on St. Simon's Island, Sapelo Island, Jekyll Isle, including the plantations, churches, cemeteries, parks, etc. Dana's goal is to honor, protect, and pass down the legacy and rich history of her ancestors whose spirits still inhabit the space throughout the coastal area empire. So we will begin with Dana, and I'm going to bear with me 1 second because we're going to get the slides for Dana so that she can do her presentation. So again, bear with us. Let me go ahead and do that. Hold on. Sorry, folks. I have that in my Make sure I get you guys the right. Like I said, bear with me 1 second, please.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for your patience. We are having some technical difficulties. We will just resume in just a second, okay? Thank you so much. All right, for those of you who are just joining us, we're having some technical difficulties. So just give us about a minute. We'll resume in just a second, okay? Thank you. Again, you guys, thank you so much for your patience. We're almost there. Um, we're going to get started with this wonderful presentation in just a second. Thank you.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. All right. Let's get Dana's slide back up in here. Dana, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. I'm gonna get your slide up, and I apologize. My whole system froze, so we never had this
Okay.
technical difficulty, but we're gonna get through it because this information needs to be heard
Okay.
first. Be patient with me 1 second. Okay. All right, Dana, we're gonna go through your slides and give us some breakdowns of your culture as far as Gullah Geechee and a little bit of your background and how you guys became to know Gullah Geechee, et cetera, and just take us through this journey. And then wherever you need us to stop for the slides, we will stop.
Okay. Well, hello, everybody.
Everyone's on mute, but they can hear you.
That's okay. That's okay.
Mhm.
Well, as he read in my bio, I was born and raised in coastal Georgia, here in a town called Brunswick, Georgia. And my family traces its roots back to West Africa, to Sierra Leone, about 8 generations. And my family originally, when they came here to work on the Hoffa plantation here in Brunswick, Georgia, which is literally about 5-7 miles from my house. So the tradition is that's been handed down from my family from one generation to the other, is the tradition of keeping your Gullah Geechee roots. And that entails some of your Africanism, your traditions they brought from Africa, the foods they cook, the way we love and protect and keep the oral histories, and just taking care of the family from even baby showers to this day, there are certain rituals that are still done. So what we've done with our culture, what we've done with it is we decided that we will spread our love throughout the community for other people to enjoy this rich history. And that is, are you moving the slides along?
Yes, I will.
Okay, so Basically, we're at the point now where we're engaging in historical tours to tell our stories. There's so many beautiful oral histories that's been handed down, and the beautiful thing is that the descendants, all of them, I think, have some type of understanding of where exactly they came from, what it is to be a Gullah Geechee person, and what that means in our family. Distinctively, we have connected through different music and food ways. But the nature of this whole idea is for our family to engage and to share the people and the customs, like I said, and the traditions. And what you see on this slide here to the bottom, to my right, maybe your left, is a group of women with a washboard in front of them. And they use this washboard to tell stories, and they sing old songs that's been handed down through storytelling. And they are called the McIntosh Shouters. They reside about 15 miles from my house in another town, but we're all on this coast and we all have the same customs and beliefs as far as that can go back, like I said, to West Africa. So there are many traditions and customs that we want to share our story and our love and our passion for. Now, in this picture, in the basket, you see that's called a sweetgrass basket. And it's very big in the Charleston, South Carolina, the Savannah, Georgia community, and even in the Riceboro, Georgia, and the Brunswick area, where they still to this day carry out that tradition. They brought that craft from West Africa. The praise houses are, you know what those are. They went there and they praised God after they had long hours of labor in the fields. And there's a picture of some of the culture of the foods, some of the foods that we make. That's the red rice and the collard greens, and a lot of barbecuing and smoking of fish is done here. We eat a lot of okra in this area. There's a lot of rice puddings and a lot of rice dishes that we gravitate to. A lot of yams, a lot of candy yams, a lot of vegetables that we make beautiful dishes and foods with. When the truth arises, falsehood perishes. This is a picture of Dr. Jamal Touré. He also goes by Day Clean Spirit, and he dresses up and he do these reenactments, and he tells these stories from Haiti. He tells these stories from Sierra Leone. He goes back to Senegal. He tells Creole stories, and he speaks heavily in the Gullah Geechee dialect. And he even speaks these different languages. So he puts on tours, and we also take people to see Dr. Jamal Touré present. And he presents out here on the beach, on Jekyll Island, and on St. Simon's at times. So if you get a chance, please Google Dr. Touré. Gullah traditions are the customs, beliefs, and ways of life that have been passed down, like I said, among Sea Island families. And the Sea Islands are those barrier islands that extend off the shore of Georgia. And again, sweetgrass baskets, quilting, knitting, fishing nets is big on Sapelo Island. We also give tours out to Sapelo Island, day tours. And this is just some of the quilts that some of the ladies and the grandchildren are engaged in. And of course, the sweetgrass baskets here that are displayed, you'll find those along in the markets, particularly in Savannah and in Charleston, South Carolina. Now, there's all of these pictures display an experience that we engage in. Rather at the bottom, there may be a young man that's teaching how to catch shrimp and fish and casting nets at the bottom. We do the tours at Jekyll Island, the horseback tours on the beach. We engage in the smoking of the salmon that takes place over on Sapelo Island, where the men and the young boys have been doing for generations, catching the smoked mullets. I'm sorry, I said salmons, but I meant the mullet fish. And it's just a tradition to teach the children how to carry on, how to properly smoke and to prepare and smoke. And then we eat the delicious fish. And then there's storytellings of the other pictures. Now the Gullah Geechee communities extend down from North Carolina on the coast. The Gullah Geechee corridor extends from Wilmington, North Carolina, and then the lower part of Cape Fear, and it goes all the way down to throughout Charleston and the Beaufort and the Georgetown areas, and then we end up in Brunswick, Georgia, and along Darien, and then all the barrier islands off the coast of Georgia, down until St. Augustine, Florida. That's the Gullah Geechee corridor. And it extends from the edge of the Atlantic Ocean, and it goes all the way inland, 35 miles inland. Again, we will preserve our culture, and by teaching it to the descendants and the children throughout our area. We have annual festivals that we engage in, and we like to take our groups particularly love to go to Beaufort, South Carolina, and to Sapelo Island. The beautiful low countries here are gorgeous, and you can see a picture that we actually took over on Jekyll Island of the beautiful live oak tree with the Spanish moss hanging down. Retirement communities, restaurants, outdoor activities, and sports can engage in all of these beautiful activities here. That's a part of the lifestyle here. Vacation getaways. This is a picture up in the far right-hand corner. You'll see preparation for a feast. This is done over at Sapelo Island, where the men do a lot of the cooking, prepping the meats, and then you have children playing there. Of course, beaches are all around on the coast of Sapelo Island, Jekyll Island, Sea Island, and St. Simon's Island. And that's a picture of a local market I took there.
Now, I have a question in regards to, or, if we can just massage this part of the conversation. Now, are the customs that were kept, you mentioned 8 generations ago, are the customs still kept as they were from back when everyone came in? I mean, are they keeping all of that? And tell us a little bit about when the Gullah people actually even came into the coast from West Africa. What time frame was that?
Well, that time frame when that we can go back is the early 1700s. And yes, and some of the customs are very much so kept in place. As people die off, we express to our children and the youth their importance, because we're in this micro society where some of them gravitate to what's going on elsewhere, but the traditions are to keep some of the customs going, and particularly out in the church that's still there, that was built by our enslaved people. The church is there. They carry out some of the praises like they did. That's a custom. The way that you enter the church is a custom. The way the women will always enter first. That's just one of the customs that they teach and keep going. Another custom and tradition that they do ring singings. Some people request at funerals that they engage in some of the ring ceremonies, and what we'll have is a group of shouters telling the stories from back during slavery time. That's one of the customs and traditions that I can recall that a lot of young people will request just to have the shouters bring that custom in, or the families tell some of the stories about their great-grandmama or their great-great-great-grandmama. Now, I can go back 8 generations. So there's a lot of storytellings that take place at birthday parties, at campfires. So that's some of the customs. One of the biggest things is understanding that the importance for these children is to know that it can be one of them to carry on being a storyteller, teller. If you're a storyteller, if you think you are a storyteller, and one of the traditions is you may link up with an elder who is already doing that, and they'll continue to pour into you so you can carry it out. Just like the basket weaving, planting and harvesting certain times of the year People still plant okra around here, and whether it's in a bucket, they may still be planting and harvesting some of those foods that they brought in from West Africa.
Now, as far as the word kumbaya, is it true that that is a Gullah Geechee term? Did kumbaya come from Gullah Geechee? And what does it mean?
Well, kumbaya is said to be Gullah Geechee. I've heard my uncles them talk about that, and my great uncles them talk about that. And from what I learned is it definitely is Gullah Geechee, and it's always meant kumbaya, not come by here. They were calling kumbaya like ya, not come by here. I think as Europeans have interacted and came into understanding and getting some of that information, they switched it out. But my great grandmother, they were very Geechee, and they always said kumbaya, kumbaya, ya, like they're speaking to God. That's my understanding.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to leave some room for some Q&As at the end. If anyone has any questions, you can ask it at the end. And Dana, thank you for that portion. I'm going to leave some room for some questions at the end. So if anyone has any for Dana, please feel free to ask.
Thank you.
Yep. Next, we have Diane van der Vigever. Diane is a descendant of the Suriname Maroons, and I'm going to go ahead and give Diane the screen so that she can give her presentation on the Maroons of Suriname. So Diane, are you there?
Yes,
And would you
I'm
be able
here.
to? You're there.
You guys-
Wonderful.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So just to clarify, I am not really a descendant from the Maroons. I am a descendant from plantation slaves, but like we all are. But I will clarify in a few seconds.
Okay.
How do I share my screen? How do I do this?
At the
Because
bottom, it says share, a little green button. And once you click that and you
my
select
goodness.
you press that, and then you press the screen again. Press it one more time. There you
Hang
go.
on.
There you go. We can
You
see.
guys see this?
Yes, we can. If you want to make it bigger so the whole thing takes up, there you go. All right.
Okay.
You good to go.
All right. So I'm actually really glad with the way Dana started her presentation, because my presentation starts with a little bit of history, as in how first the whole slave thing happened for the Netherlands and West Africa and the Caribbean. And then I will go into the Maroons as they are today. So the Dutch slave trade is how everything started. And between 1650 and 1830, mainly Dutch slave traders brought over 250,000 African people to Suriname. I always speak about African people, and I don't use the word slaves until I start talking about the fact that they were already in bondage. So they brought over people to Suriname. But those 250,000, of course, are part of a much bigger enterprise and little business we call the triangle trade. You see on the pictures, the one where you see all the slaves on the upper deck trying to get a little bit of air, I suppose, because as many of you already know, the voyage from Africa to the Caribbean, West Indies, a lot of people died, and somewhere in the year 1769, a doctor wrote a little manual for slave ship captains saying, if you wish to keep your cargo alive, do these things like air and spray around lemon juice to make the below deck smell nice. You can see from the picture on the left how closely people were stacked up together in a slave ship, and the for two decks basically. So the triangle trade, what was that? Now, so you see in the picture on the top right, you see England and mainland Europe, and the little darker green part, that's the Netherlands, itty bitty country. They came up with a genius plan. So they decided to go down to Africa, to that little armpit place that we call the Gold Coast and deliver weapons and gunpowder and liquor and all kinds of things from England and the Netherlands to West Africa. There they would sell it and trade it for people. So empty the ship, load up the ship with the people, and then go from there up to, in the second arrow, up to where the Caribbean is. So you see all these little islands right here. That's where they, on Curacao, St. Martin, and in actually further down in the little place called Charleston in the US, offloaded the people, sold them into slavery, again, get a bunch of money, bought sugar, tobacco, cotton, and coffee from the plantations, and then trade that and take that back to Europe. So this triangle trade that started around 1650 and took a very, very long time. And in 1830, slave trade actually stopped, it ended, but it did not end slavery itself. So everybody who was then enslaved was there to stay, no more new cargo brought in, but the trade itself would end by 1830. So Suriname is a interesting little country in South America. And in the 18th century, approximately only 700 Europeans lived there, and they presided over 4,000 enslaved people. The custom was that were you a rich person and you lived in the capital, you would have 10 to 30 slaves in your household. I posted this little picture here to show you how crazy it was when a gentleman and his lady would go out for a walk. You see, all the people that they have with them are all their slaves. So there's one holding an umbrella, there's a little child holding an extra umbrella, there's some elaborately dressed up other people behind them, and the very last one is holding a little book. You can see that book. That's supposed to be a Bible. These people are walking to church, and they want everybody to see how wealthy they are, because one is carrying this, and for every little thing, they as a slave to carry it around. So this would be city life, very much. Any regular plantation would have about 100 slaves. The interesting thing about plantation life is that most of them would be on the rivers. And a plantation would be, as you can see all these little stripes, a plantation is not very wide, but it would be very deep. And what they would have to do is basically, the river runs through the jungle. So you come on land, you start chopping and burning your way deeper and deeper and deeper. And then at some point you stop, and that is your plantation. You start planting all your stuff. What would happen, of course, is that the outer edge of your plantation would border immediately on jungle. So for the Europeans, there was a bit of a challenge to venture out, but not so much for the enslaved people, because they would venture out a bit, do some fishing, come back, which is really, really crazy, but I'll get into that later. They would have tree trunk boats and venture out into creeks and stuff and come back. So at some point when they had enough, they would run away. And the actual running away would be during the rainy season, because then it's a jungle very dense and you can get away. You walk 5 or 10 yards, someone behind you blinks twice and they can't see you anymore. So basically this is what would happen. So the slaves that got away, they settled in the jungle and they became the first Maroons, actually. The word maroon comes from a Spanish Caribbean word cimarron, and cimarron means actually cattle that runs wild or runs away or is can be kept. So that's where the word maroon actually comes from, and it's being used all over. So from the settlements that they are having in the jungle, they would turn back to plantations, steal goods, free other people, and plan their rebellions. So at first it was just a bit of a nuisance to the plantation owners, but as more and more slaves would run away, it became kind of costly. So this is one overview of a plantation. You see at the bottom, you see the river with 2 boats, and you see a little bit trees in the beginning. You see the buildings here. the big house and some barracks. And then at the back, you see how the plantation goes towards the end. Now you see on the left and right, you see that jungle coming, see? So basically, and I think they might have exaggerated a bit because people would have their plantation painted and send the paintings back to the family in the Netherlands just to show them, look how big my plantation is. Sometimes it was a big fat lie and it was like half this, but you can see how at the outer edge, the moment that there's jungle, you don't really know where you are unless you were a slave. So what would happen was, and I want you to focus on this little book here, plantation owners would hire militia and volunteer armies, and they would even hire them all the way from Europe. So people who didn't really have anything to do or had quit the army or whatever, and they would be stoked up saying, yeah, let's go catch all these runaway people, right? Well, they would say other words, the N word probably, and then they would embark on a ship, go to the colonies and fight for the plantation owners and try to track down the runaways and bring them back to the plantation. Now that didn't really always work as well. So what they also did is if they had caught one or found a slave that knew a lot and went fishing a lot, they would force them to track down the others and walk in front, and then the army would walk behind them. So they would give those slaves a red cap on their head. And the Surinamese word for it is redi musu, a red cap. So they would always know that the one with red caps is for the militia and working on our side, basically. To this day, in Surinamese society, if you are a traitor and a backstabber, we call you a redi musu. So this book right here is written by John Gabriel Stedman. He was half Scottish Englishman, and he was a hired gun. He was one of the people that enlisted and went down to Suriname. From the moment that he got there, he kept a diary. It was very detailed. I advise you guys, if you can get it, please read it. I have it at home as well. He very quickly learned that the slaves were treated really, really appallingly. And he kind of deserted because he figured, nah, I can't do this. The first thing he noticed is when they did catch a person and bring them back to the plantation, these people were punished harshly. You can only imagine, but we also saw the movies. So chopped off limbs left and right. So he figured, I can't do this. He wrote this book because he was in the colony from 73 to 77. The book was published in England. I'm sorry. Did I hear someone ask a question? I heard a sound.
No, all is well. It was probably just someone's feedback, but we'll get everyone
okay.
muted. Go ahead.
All right. Okay, please tell me if I'm taking too long. All right. Okay, so
no, it's good. We want to get to the wars. We definitely want to hear more. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So he published this book in 1799, and a bunch of upper class ladies started reading it, got angry, and they kind of started the whole abolishment movement in England. They started writing letters to Parliament saying, hey, so as of the year 1828, oh no, I'm sorry, that's later. They would start a discussion about how do you treat tribes? Who are these people? Are they people? Do they have souls? Those questions always came about. And then when they saw a lot of pictures and the drawings that Stedman did, they were convinced. There are drawings in this book, and you can Google that, about the different tortures, but he describes plantation life, he describes the jungle life, and the fighting that went on. So this has become a very important book. There is a Mr. Richard Price. I will get to him later. He studies Caribbean studies, and he's written a lot of books about it as well. I'll get to that later. So one of the slave revolts that kind of turned everything around was the slave revolt of the Tempati Creek. So there was a wood plantation at the Tempati Creek, and the plantation owner figured he was going to send half of his slaves to another place in Suriname, like way, way, way out of the way. And the people revolted because they didn't want to go. He was actually going to break up friends and families as they used to do, because if you consider someone's body your property, then you decide where the body goes and what it does and whether it lives or dies. So, but that was a big deal for these people. They said, no, what the hell are you thinking? We're not going anywhere. We either we stay here, right, or we leave. And then there was a whole kerfuffle, and they actually left. So half of his slaves in the night left, and they joined the Maroons, and then they came back. They set the bunch on fire, then left again. So now, because this was one of the larger wood plantations, the plantation owner got help from the governor, and they sent the whole colonial army into the woods. Yeah, it didn't really work out because those slaves and those Maroons, they knew their way about, they knew how to fight, and they slaughtered them and defeated the army. So this particular people are now known as one tribe. There are 6, one Maroon tribe in Suriname, in the jungle, and we call them Aukaners. So this slave revolt thing, this war lasted from 57 to 60. And on October 10, the governor kind of gave in, and there were peace talks. And then they did a peace treaty, and they got their freedom and independence. And that means that that particular Aukan tribe has been free since October 10, 1760, which is like a whole 100 years before everybody else, all right? So they have been living there since then until now, and I'll get to that later. So on October 10 is the Day of the Maroons. Since 1976, they celebrate it in Suriname, and they celebrate it in the city as well. So the city becomes this place of celebration. We have a very large garden, if you will. It's a park. Yeah, it's a park in the city. It's called the Palmentuin. It's called the Garden of Palms. And that's where all celebrations are. So on October 10, there's a big, big celebration, food and music and lectures and stalls. Well, you can picture it. So these are very proud people, as you can imagine, because everybody else was stuck at the plantation that couldn't go or didn't want to go, or maybe the plantation owner was your dad and the slave was your mom, and you kind of lived in the kitchen, so you don't really run because your life is just different. As far as numbers, in 1770, there were 5,000 to 6,000 Maroons, which is really, really a big deal, living in the jungle. And at 1863, when slavery was officially abolished, there were 10,000 Maroons compared to the 38,000 some slaves. There's a question mark at the bottom because those that were on the plantation were made to work an additional 10 years. So yeah, governor says, hey, July 1st, 1863, and the king in the Netherlands did the whole proclamation thing and say, yeah, slavery is over. But here's the thing. If you were a slave living in the city, and maybe you were, by that time, you were an accountant, or you were an agent, or you were a doctor's assistant, or whatever, you were free to go. And you didn't, because just from that time on, they would just pay you and you would stick around because that was your craft or it was your job, right? And it was your life. A lot goes for the household slaves as well, because if you were a cook or a butler or whatever, basically this is your job. So slavery is over, but you're not really leaving. For the plantation slaves, it was quite a different story. They said, okay, so you can't leave. You have to stay for another 10 years and you're free to leave, walk off the plantation in 73. So that's a bit of a thing. Also, the government of the Netherlands would compensate plantation owners for every slave that left or every slave that died. So you understand that when slave owners punished people and, you know, within an inch of their life, okay, whatever, but if anybody ran away, they would get like 300 guilders, and 300 guilders would nowadays maybe be $1,500 for a slave. So that is a bit of a big deal. Yeah, Maroons today. So you understand, they got their freedom and independence in 1760, that one tribe, but also many, many tribes followed really fairly quickly. So approximately by 1765, 67, all the others that were living in the woods were also free and independent. They have been passing on their original African tradition and culture from generation to generation to up till now. So I can totally relate to what Dana was explaining earlier. If you have your oral tradition, if you give your culture to the next generation and the next, including stories and songs and your arts and your crafts, that keeps going. So we have 6 different tribes, and they are Aukaners, Saramacans, Paramacans, Aluku, Matawi, and Quinti. And in the census of 2012, there were 117,567 Maroons. And on the whole, there are about 400,000 people in Suriname. So these are as many, almost a quarter of them is a little bit more than a quarter are Maroons. They have their own religion, which is called Vinti. They are traditional followers of it, and Gaan Gadu is their main god, and he's the creator of everything in existence, basically what we would call Yahweh or Jah. So, but then, German missionaries, who else? From the Herrnhutters were there since 1735, trying first to christen the natives, the Arawak. Those are the natives from a large part of South America and the islands. The people that were mistaken to be Indian by Columbus are Arawak or Caribe. So hence the word Caribbean. Well, the Arawak didn't really go for it. So, and then the German missionaries shifted their attention to the Maroons and plantation slaves. About 40% of them are Christians today. The thing is, of course, the Bible has been used to keep people enslaved. So this is always a bit of a thing. I know many people today who are turned Herrnhutters, and they're also like friends from my parents. And I will not say anything about it because I'm a Catholic. So we're all Christians. We're all kind of 300 years later fell for it or whatever. That's why I'm looking into my Orishas, but that's a different story. Yeah, it's a bit of a thing, missionaries. So this is some of the artwork that I could find online of the Aukaners and Saramacans. They make beautiful, beautiful woodwork, and it's colorful, it's beautiful. The one on the right, you see that the front of that house, basically with a beautiful, beautiful door. Every different little color wood is a different wood type. So we have a red wood and yellow wood and a brown wood, and we even have a thing called purple. It's actually a purple wood, and it's really, really gorgeous. And of course you can go see, because there are always tourists going and buying the beautiful things. And this is one of my favorite pictures. Here you see a bunch of girls. This is basically a picture taken like last year. As you see, they wear their beautiful, what we call a pani, which is like a cotton cloth that you put around you. And they all wear tops and bras, but that's a relatively new thing because, they used to walk just bare-chested. So a wonderful thing that I want to share with you, and I hope it works. I'm going to click on this YouTube link because it was about 10 years ago when a man from Ghana was invited to come to Suriname. And he is from what would be the Kromanti people. And in Suriname, one of the Aukaner tribes are actually descendants from Kromanti people. And what happens next is really, really, really super sweet. If I click on this, will it all start working, Shabe?
It would. Also, how long is it? Because I wanted to, in interest of time, I wanted to I know I want to get
Okay,
to
so
the
they
part.
record.
Yeah, so let's play, but let's get to the part where they meet, and then if we can close out. So
Okay,
the
yeah, let me go quick. Where they come on land. They come on land. They get out there. Lady explains. Let me see, and I know her.
is
So
this showing on
okay.
your end?
Is it showing on my end? Is it showing for you?
No,
Do I
but
click?
what you can do is if you can cut and paste it in the chat,
Oh, of
um,
course.
and then Raphael's going to
That
grab that
is
and share it with the group, and that way
yes.
they can look at it. Then we'll come back to that. Is that okay?
Yes, it's okay. There's a chat in this thing. Let me see. Oh my
Yes, there
goodness.
is, right at the
Oh,
bottom. Yeah.
there's a thing here called more. It says chat. Oh my goodness, I'm learning. Oh geez, I feel so stupid. Don't
Just
laugh
go
at me. No, you're laughing.
cut and
Come on.
paste. But I'm going to go ahead and get Director Z in because he also has the presentation. Thank you, Diane. That was excellent. Good history.
Okay.
And we actually looking
I
forward
will,
to
I will
learning
put
more.
I will put one slide in the chat as well,
Okay,
so people can see the titles of the books that I want them to read.
perfect. Okay, and hang around because we have some Q&As that we'll get to at the end of your
Oh
presentation.
yes, I'll be
Awesome.
here.
Okay, awesome.
All right.
All right. And so now we have Director Z. We gave his intro. And Diane, if you don't mind, stop your sharing so that he can get in and pull up his presentation.
Okay, hang on. Pause share, new share. Oh
There
my
you
God, I'm
go.
clicking.
Excellent.
Is it gone?
It's gone. Okay, excellent. So we're
Okay.
going to get Director Z to come in. I advise everyone to strap on your seatbelts. Make sure you
Uh-oh.
have whatever you need to sit down and keep you strapped in. Let me make sure that he's here. Hold on. I don't. Are you there? There you go. Okay. All right. So go ahead and put your presentation on. Pull it up on the screen, and we will be here. And then take the time you need, and then we'll have the Q&A. As I told everyone in the beginning, we may go over a little bit. We did have some technical difficulties, so hang around with us. And Director Z, go ahead.
Indeed, indeed. I'm pulling up this PowerPoint now and just making sure you all can see it. Give me 1 second. Are you able to see?
Yes, we see the Rams on.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Well, greetings to everyone. Thank you again, Kashab, for the opportunity to participate in the 30-day redemption process. And definitely enjoyed the previous panelists and presenters. Very good information. This particular presentation that I'll be doing is about the Jamaican Maroons community, which I'm a direct descendant of. One of the communities, which is in Accompong, that's the biggest community, Maroon community on the island of Jamaica. Nonetheless, here we begin. And by the way, what you all are seeing, both to the listeners and everybody viewing, is called a beng. It is a war horn. And it is one of the devices, along with drums and other things, vocal sounds that the Maroons in Jamaica use to send signals and to communicate with each other without being detected. In other words, even if there were people that were listening or heard those sounds, the Maroons, the Jamaican Maroons, created a sort of language off of the sounds they would make using this abeng. It's called an abeng, A-B-E-N-G, war horn. Nonetheless, Maroon history, identity, and culture. And this is centering on the Jamaican Maroon experience. So just to do a brief recap, for those that may or may not know, the name of Jamaica as it's spelled, it comes from an indigenous word, which is actually spelled or sounding Jamaica, and it was Jamaica was originally inhabited by Taino native people. Spain was the European country that originally colonized Jamaica, and later on, Spain fought a war with Britain, and Britain took over Jamaica. Nonetheless, the Spaniards were the first ones who transported Africans to Jamaica to labor as enslaved workers on sugar plantations. And as I mentioned a few seconds ago, during that war, after that war that Britain fought with Spain, they seized the control of the country in approximately 1655. So that's something to be aware of. Now, before and also after 1655, the ancestors of the Jamaican Maroons, or the communities that exist now, had reasserted their freedom both before 1655 and after. They continued, whether through individuals and then after 65 as more larger groups or families. They went into the interior and basically set up villages, communities, and societies. And this is a sort of excerpt from a source about that, just sort of explaining that, about how the Maroons went into the interior to, you know, to set up their own societies. They refused to deal and operate within the so-called slave system. Also, it's important to mention also, I don't know if on my screen it's showing, it looks maybe a bit large, but nonetheless, also it's important to mention that the Maroons, after they went into the interior, they became such a threat as far as fighting back and raiding against the British, that the British government signed several peace treaties with different Maroon societies. Okay, so that's something to be very much aware of. As far as Maroon identity in Jamaica, it is absolutely grounded on resistance, on sovereign societies, on self-determination, and taking it by force. I can't overemphasize that enough, I should say. Taking it by force. So that's how the Maroons in Jamaica literally got their quote-unquote respect. They were already free. If you talk to Jamaican Maroons now, they will tell you they want no association with the word slave or even the slave construct. But nonetheless, as a point of fact, the Jamaican Maroons and those communities won their freedom by war. So they got these peace treaties, or signed these peace treaties with the British colonial government, which recognized their sovereignty. So let me just go to the next slide and we'll get a little bit into that. This is one of the peace treaties that was signed. This is a picture I took of it visiting the family compound up in a compound town in Jamaica. This was signed. This peace treaty was signed between the British colonial government in 1739 and the Jamaican Leeward Maroons. That's the Maroons. There's particular groups that sign different peace treaties. So that's the group that signed this, and that's the writing on the actual treaty. So that's something to be aware of. Now, to get to the wording, just a bit of the wording on 1739 peace treaty. As you see, there were various segments of it. The first one said that all hostilities shall cease. And secondly, it says in summary that Captain Cudjoe, which was one of the famous Maroon commanders, and his captains and all of the men and women and the children in his community shall hereafter in a perfect state of freedom and liberty. So this is basically recognizing their sovereignty. The British were forced to recognize the sovereignty of these particular Maroons due to the Maroons winning battles against them. Also, I might add, if you look down at the third portion, it mentions this also. Thirdly, that they shall enjoy and possess for themselves and posterity, their children, forever, all the land situate and lying between Trelawney Town and the Cockpits to the amount of 1,500 acres. Nonetheless, this is basically illustrating that not only did they win recognition of their sovereignty and their freedom, but they also won territory. So they got their land not by some sympathy from the colonialists or the enslaving society. They won it through war. Now, another peace treaty that's important to mention that was signed by Jamaican Maroons and the British colonial government is another one. This is the one signed between the Jamaican Windward Maroons, which are another group of Maroons that were also fighting. And again, it has two excerpts from that treaty that all hostilities cease on both sides. And it also mentions another commander that Captain Quo and his people shall have a certain quantity of land given to them in order to raise. In other words, this is repeating the same thing that we heard in that other peace treaty we just read. They won the recognition of their sovereignty and also land by war, not someone giving it to them or feeling sympathetic or begging. Now, Maroon identity. It's necessary to sort of give an outline of this so that the listeners that may not be aware, and even those that are aware, get a deeper sense of what a Maroon actually is, or what it means to constitute a Maroon, or who is a Maroon. So it starts off with a question, what makes someone a Maroon? Can anyone just decide to claim they're a Maroon? The answer is no, absolutely not. And in this PowerPoint, there's certain things I wanted to make sure I highlight. Being a Maroon is an ethnicity. It's an absolute ethnicity with most Maroons, or a large percentage, I should say, especially in Jamaica and many other places, I imagine, they will tell you in no uncertain terms that they are a nation, depending on which community they belong to. They will tell you, due to the peace treaties, which is what the peace treaties actually state, recognizing these Maroon groups as sovereign nations. So I'm just making a mention of that. It's important to understand that when we speak about people that are Maroons, we're talking about people that are of an ethnic, or if we shall, genetic lineage. So to be a Maroon, that's one of the first things. Verifiable hereditary descent from Maroon ancestors. Also, part of being a Maroon, beyond just obviously being born from someone, ancestor, is remembering and honoring your Maroon ancestors, your history, and actively practicing Maroon culture. That's a very fundamental part about being a Maroon, or who is a Maroon. Providing for your family. Now, this is something I cannot overemphasize. Being a Maroon is grounded in maintaining superior physical fitness and combat readiness to physically protect them from all harm. Them meaning your family and your people. This is grounded in Maroon identity. There's no way to separate being a Maroon from being a warrior, because it's a warrior genetics, it's a warrior species, it's a warrior lineage. Moving on, another important aspect of Maroon identity is membership in a Maroon collective. Maroons always are attached to some
Are we having
family.
technical difficulties again?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can someone, if you're not muted, please mute. Okay, continue, brother.
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I'm hearing you great. Maybe
Okay.
someone was having issues on their end, but all sounds well.
No worries. So I guess I'll just continue on. Being a Maroon, part of being a Maroon is also being a member of a collective, whether that's a family, a village, a community, or organization. So there's no such thing as an individual Maroon, because the very genesis of who Maroons are came about from coming together and unity and achieving one's autonomy for one's people. Also, another aspect, very important aspect of being a Maroon, is defending and maintaining the autonomy, whether that's ethnic, political, cultural, economics, autonomy, and sovereignty and property and self-determination of Maroon people. Now, I mentioned a few minutes ago about how those peace treaties, the two that I showed, were signed in 1739. If you add up, if you calculate from 1739 up to today, that's over, it should be over 275 years or 70 something years. Now, if you backtrack to when the Maroons, the original Maroons went into the interior and formed those communities. If you backtrack to 1655, which is when that started occurring, or occurred before that actually, you're coming up with 365 years at a minimum. So I'm just mentioning those numbers to be aware that Maroons in Jamaica, in one form or another, have been practicing autonomy and establishing and asserting their ethnic, political, cultural, economic, and social autonomy for at least 365 years. Now, two final points about what it means to be a Maroon: intergenerational treaties and unbreakable oaths of loyalty and mutual aid to fellow Maroons. If we're talking about what a Maroon is most proud of, it's not treaties signed with oppressors. It's not winning some sort of concession or recognition of sovereignty from some oppressive state. What Maroons would be most proud of and should be most proud of is the treaties that they make with one another, between their families, to defend one another, protect one another, and defend one another. Nonetheless, also a final point I want to make about what it means to be a Maroon: never tolerate and always reject and fight against oppression. That's a fundamental part of Maroon identity, to never accept oppression, ever, to always fight against it where it's ugly hit. Moving on to Maroon culture, just wanted to give a few thoughts on Maroon culture as it is expressed. And before I even mention, I want to be clear. This is a sort of broad expression of Maroon culture. Every Maroon family or community in Jamaica, or from the Jamaican communities that live elsewhere in the world, may practice different things. However, so this section, what I'm about to talk about, is given a broad brush of it. Also, it is also discussing modern Maroon culture, not just historical in the past, but modern Maroon culture, which is always updating and forming and improving itself. So with that said, some things to be aware of Maroon culture. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, there is a military ethos that runs through Maroon culture. Part of that is being in mandatory physical fitness training and self-defense proficiency. Is part of the identity of what being a Maroon is. Also, combat readiness, and I might add, being a Maroon, in far as Maroon culture is absolutely intolerant of traitors. There's no toleration in the past, or I would definitely argue even today. So Maroon culture doesn't accept someone that is a Maroon selling out or betraying or helping to hurt and harm another Maroon. Also, Maroon culture centers on male family leadership. Now, some other things to be aware of in terms of Maroon culture is very geared towards being autonomous and not dependent on the outside societies or other people outside of the culture. So part of that is always a drive and a thrust to maintain rites of passage to adulthood, particular marriage rituals or marriage systems, any mediation between families or individuals is almost certainly always preferred to be done within the Maroon circle. One thing I might also add for the listeners to be aware of, some Maroon families still practice polygyny, meaning a man having more than one wife, and also no sex until marriage. Another aspect of Maroon culture is land ownership, maintaining ancestral lands. As I mentioned, two of the Maroon communities that signed peace treaties, they won ancestral lands. And there are others, not just those two I mentioned, there are others. That's a huge part of Maroon culture, maintaining those ancestral lands that our people died for, that fought and died for, and passing it on to the younger generations or to the next generations, living on the land, growing crops on the land, and living in a rural territory, so to speak. Also, part of Maroon culture, midwifery, having children at home births, and using midwives. Maroon culture prizes high intelligence. Culture, education, homeschooling, as I mentioned, even updated to today, skilled trades and STEM. So Maroons are always seeking to be educated and respect and prize that and promote that among themselves. Maroon culture also prizes and promotes economy, entrepreneurship, business ownership, interfamily micro banking. Why am I mentioning this? Because we have to be aware, we being, the listeners, we're talking about people that for over, as I mentioned, over 300 years have been practicing autonomy. They were practicing these things over that course of time, even after they signed the treaties, those treaties with the British colonial government. So these things are all part and parcel of what Maroons have been used to in terms of economy and being entrepreneurs and not waiting for somebody else to do something for them. Also, health and wellness. Being a Maroon is a huge part of it, is maintaining excellent health. When they were fighting those wars against the British colonial government on the island of Jamaica, there were no hospitals. There were no medical clinics. They had no way to go and seek medical aid from those that they were fighting. So they developed very, very, very strong practices of natural healing, herbal medicine, self-healing, building up the body, eating natural foods, physical exercise, and strength training, as I mentioned. So health and wellness, gigantic part of Maroon culture. And also, I might add on this section, death and burial. Maroons have their own cemeteries in the Maroon areas in Jamaica. I visited them. I know this for an absolute fact. So that is a huge part where Maroon, when they die, they are expected to be, their bodies prepared by their loved ones and also buried in the Maroon cemetery. Two final points. Being a Maroon in terms of culture, it is about protecting the environment because that's where the ancestral Maroons fled into the interior in Jamaica and of course elsewhere also. And so the respect of nature just in general, just on those points is tremendous because it's looked at as a way of gratefulness and thankfulness for being able to go into nature and being able to hide in areas that were inhospitable to the colonizers, areas that they were able to build and reform their families, areas that they were able to fight and hide and do whatever they needed to do to survive. So for those reasons and many others, that is a huge part of Maroon culture, environmental conservation, recycling, etc., even up to updating it to non-toxic products. It all goes back to giving gratefulness and thankfulness to nature for protecting the Maroons. And that goes into natural foods, clothing, and many other things that different Maroon communities or families may practice also. Now, few things that I'm in terms of Jamaican Maroon communities. Jamaican Maroon communities, there are quite a few, and I definitely apologize if I don't mention all names because I may not be aware definitely of all, but some of the main ones are the ones you're looking at. The Compound Maroon community, or should I say nation, because they signed a peace treaty, so that's what the peace treaty said. They're recognized as a sovereign people. The Compound Maroon nation, which is where my family is from and I'm from, that's located in St. Elizabeth, Jamaica. They have a Facebook page, as you could see. Reach out, connect with them. Another prominent Maroon nation that signed a peace treaty with the British colonial government is the Charlestown Maroon nation, and they're located in the area of Portland, Jamaica. They also have a website and a Facebook page. Several others are the Moortown Maroons, and this is the information that you're looking at, located in Moortown, Jamaica. They have a Facebook page, and also the Trelawney Town Flagstaff Maroons, and they're located in St. James, Jamaica. All of these Maroon communities, and there may be some others that I'm not aware of, but all of these Maroon communities have their own land. They have their own sovereign land that they govern. So that's important to mention when you come into contact with these Maroon peoples in Jamaica. Be aware that you need to treat them as a sovereign nation because that's the status that they have or acquired due to their people winning that war. And also, I might add Jamaican Maroons are not located solely in Jamaica in those communities, but they're also located throughout the United States, Latin America, Europe, and the world itself. Now, I want to give some examples of how Maroon culture is currently practiced as far as, in the larger society. Throughout the year, on different days, different Maroon communities hold celebrations and festivals to celebrate independence. Independence meaning when the peace treaties were signed. And one of those is the Accompong Maroon Nation. And their Independence Day is January 6th. Every year, January 6th, it may be January 6th to 7th, but the next one is coming up in 2021. And that celebrates the signing of the peace treaty between the Maroons, that particular group of Maroons, and the British colonial government in 1739. That also, on that day, January 6th to 7th, is also a time for family reunion and cultural events. So another cultural celebration in the larger community is the Charlestown Maroon Nation has an annual Charlestown Maroon Conference and Festival. People from all over the world, I might add, come to these festivals. And that occurs typically on June. This particular year, it is interesting enough in the month of July on June 20th to 23rd. So it's always in June, somewhere in the latter part of June. And that celebrates the signing of the peace treaty between that group of Maroons and the British colonial government in 1739. And that particular festival or Maroon celebration has many events, scholarly panels, cultural events. It is fairly large. People from all over the world, I should say, come to those. Now, I just gave those two, but by no means are those the only Maroon festivals and celebrations on the island of Jamaica. There are others, so be aware of that. Nonetheless, books on Maroon culture that the listeners or the viewers may find useful. Those are some that I decided to share. One is The Maroons of Jamaica by Mavis Campbell. Another one is Flight to Freedom, African Runaways and Maroons in the Americas by Alvin O. Thompson. Another is Freedom by a Thread, The History of Colombos in Brazil. And another one is Maroon Societies, Rebel Slave Societies in the Americas by Richard Price. Now, I want to make a point on something very important. Maroons don't look at them as slaves. So be aware, when you're interacting with a Maroon, and I can speak for sure of the Maroons in Jamaica in no shape, form, fashion will ever accept the slave terminology, the slave name, the slave status, everything dealing with slavery being put on them and their people. So be aware of this. So while many of the so-called scholars or the academia may use terms like slave communities and runaway slaves, Maroons reject that completely entirely. It's against a Maroon's DNA to even be considered a slave, to even refer to their people as slave. So that's something to be very much aware of. Also, for those that may be seeking to learn more in an academic or educational program about Maroons, I decided to share a very useful program. It's called Blueprint of Sovereignty, Maroon Ethnicity, Family, Health, and Wellness, Law, and Economy. And it basically touches on those areas and provides education and training about Maroon ethnicity, Maroon family, Maroon lifestyle practices, Maroon laws, and also sustainable Maroon economies. And for those that are interested, you can look at the link that is there and go to that link if you wish to learn more or sign up. And also that email, somafngo@gmail.com, somafngo@gmail.com, for those that are interested in learning about more about the Maroons educationally.
Before you come off of that screen, would you mind cutting and pasting that last one, the email and the link in the chat, so that people can have access to it just by pressing the link?
Okay.
And
sure.
we will also post it, or if you like, you can post it in the replay, post the link as well. All right. So I know that people have, well, I hope that people have questions for either Dana, Diane, or Director Z. Um, if you can, let me see, can you do, if you could do a stop share? Oh, when you're done, Director Z.
Sure.
So if anyone has any questions, you can either put it in the chat or you can ask for Dana, Diane, or Director Z. We have all three Ds. Dana, Diane, or Director Z. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yep. What do you have?
Okay, this is for Director Z. Oh, hold on, my earbuds died. Ugh. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so it's funny because I always have you ever heard of more people? Because I hear more people say more people, but then when I listen to your demonstration, is you were saying maroon. Are they the same people, or are people using the wrong name, or is there something completely different when it comes to people being Moors?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. I have gotten that question before. Um, it's a complex answer, but I'll simplify it by saying this. Being a Moor is, from what I've spoken to those, from the Moorish community, it is an ethnicity and many other things, a culture and many other things. The words are very similar, and I'm not ruling out in any way, shape, or form that there is not some historical connection. When we speak about being a Maroon, being a Maroon, as I mentioned, is a ethnicity. It's located in a particular historical event or events. So when you speak to a Maroon will trace the origin of their identity back to whoever those ancestral Maroons were, whoever fought for their freedom, whoever won their freedom, et cetera, et cetera. In terms of being a Moor, I'm sure, at least from my conversations from people in the Moorish community, they would obviously trace their origins or the origin of being a Moor slightly differently. So I don't know if that answers your question, and but there are differences. Again, I'm not in any shape or form ruling out a connection, but there are differences if you speak to people from both sides or communities, if you will, on how they would define what it means to be one or the other.
Okay.
Right, awesome. Any other questions in regards to, well, I see one in here, Alexandra, she's asking for Dana. Are Florida tours available for the Gullah corridor tours?
Yes, there are tours. We do a tour down to Kingsland Plantation in Jacksonville, Florida. And we're working on a piece to go down to St. Augustine. But yes, currently Kingsley Plantation in Jacksonville, Florida.
Excellent. Okay. Any other questions for, let me just scroll up. I see here, okay. Any other questions? Also, for anyone that's interested, inside of the chat, there are books placed there by Diane. There's information placed there by Director Z. And I believe Darrell has a question. And the question is, my questions were answered in the three presentations, but these presentations very extremely enriching and jam-packed with information that leads to further research and embraced. I thank the presenters and the 30-day redemption. I'm setting up a Zoom, my family, to converse about it. Okay, excellent. Alexandra says, I enjoyed the presentation, Director Z. Thank you for the detailed information on Maroon characteristics. Very much related. I very much relate and intrigued to study my background. Thank you. All right. So excellent presentation. I cannot say enough. I'm going to go ahead and queue up. Well, hold on. Let me make sure. Queue up the final screen. There's always more. Randolph says, thank you. Excellent. There's always more. And that's why if you have the information in the chat, go ahead and cut and paste it so that you can have it, because when we close the chat, of course, it won't be there. But we will attempt, maybe if I can get some help from those who've posted, to also post it in our Facebook group, or maybe Raphael, if you can grab those and we can post that once you post the replay. But again, Director Z has Maroon Education Course, Blueprint of Sovereignty, Maroon Ethnicity, Family, Health, and Wellness, Law, and Economics. The link is there on the screen, but we will also, again, post it on our Facebook group. Dana is offering the Gullah Corridor Tours. You can look for that in 2021. And we also are considering doing some Maroon tours in South America. I will get with Director Z and I'll get with Diane between Brazil, Guyana, and Suriname. I think we can put our brains together and come up with something great in that region. So for everyone else, please make sure you share what we're doing here at the 30-Day Redemption. I hope that it's giving you great value. It's giving me great value. And make sure you share what we're doing with others so that they can come on and learn about things that they're not learning about using these free platforms that they have on here. So again, thank you. Thank you, Director Z. Thank you, Diane. And thank you, Dana, for your time, your knowledge. We appreciate you very much. We hope you guys will let us know about any workshops and any tours. All right. So for everyone else, have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us. We will see you tomorrow. Take care.